Keanu sprints after a girl who has just stolen his wallet, furious and determined to catch her. But when he finally corners her and learns why she took it, the heartbreaking truth leaves him stunned and changes what he does next. Most life-changing days don't announce themselves. They start like any other. For Keanu Reeves, this one began with a coffee, a quiet street, and the illusion that he was finally going to have a normal morning. He walked through downtown, cap pulled low, backpack slung over one shoulder, trying to pass as just another tired commuter. The sun was still climbing between the glass towers, painting long shadows across the sidewalk. For once, nobody seemed to recognize him. No phones pointed at his face. No hurried requests for selfies. Just the soft hum of traffic and the smell of roasted coffee beans drifting from the corner cafe behind him. It felt peaceful, almost fragile, like a moment he didn't want to breathe too loudly in case it disappeared. Keanu slid his hand into his pocket to check that his wallet was still there. Habit, nothing more. It had been a rough week of meetings, charity calls, and script changes, and this morning was his reward to himself, 1 hour alone, anonymous in the city. He adjusted his black blazer, took another sip of coffee, and tried not to think about work, fame, or the weight of expectations that never really left his shoulders. Today, he told himself, he'd just be a guy in a city, watching the world move. He was so focused on staying invisible that he almost didn't notice her. She appeared in his peripheral vision like a spark, blonde hair flying behind her, denim jacket open, sneakers skidding slightly on the concrete as she cut through the crowd. She moved fast, weaving between people with the sharp, practiced instinct of someone who had done this many times before. At first, she was just another blur in the morning rush. But then, for the smallest fraction of a second, their eyes met. There was something wild there, not just desperation, but a kind of terrified determination, as if the street itself might swallow her if she stopped running. Her gaze flicked over his face, then down to the pocket of his blazer, and in that instant Keanu's stomach tightened with an unease he couldn't name. Before his mind could catch up, she collided with him. The impact jolted his coffee, spilling a dark splash across his sleeve. Her hands pressed against his chest for balance, light but quick, and he heard a breathless, "Sorry, I'm so sorry," as she stumbled past. He turned halfway, more surprised than angry, and watched her sprint away without looking back. He sighed, shook his hand free of coffee, and almost laughed it off, until his fingers slid into an empty pocket. No wallet. The realization hit him like a bucket of ice water. His heart skipped, then leaped. Credit cards, ID. A worn photograph he kept tucked behind the bills, one he didn't show anyone. Gone. In 2 seconds of clumsy contact with a stranger whose face he could barely remember, his entire morning had spun off course. He looked up. She was already half a block away. For a moment, the old instinct in him, the part that had learned to accept loss, to let go instead of clinging, whispered, "It's just a wallet. Call the bank. Cancel the cards. Move on." But another part, deeper and sharper, refused. It wasn't the money. It was the violation, the sudden reminder that even when he tried to be invisible, people still saw him as something to take from. Besides, there was that photo that he could not replace. Keanu set his coffee cup on a trash can, tightened the strap of his backpack, and took off after her. He wasn't dressed for running, but adrenaline didn't care. The city blurred around him as he pushed forward, dodging a businessman stepping off the curb, sidestepping a delivery cart, ignoring the startled looks as people recognized the running man from their movie screens. Somewhere ahead, the girl cut between 2 slow-moving tourists and shot across the intersection just as the light turned red. "Hey," Keanu shouted, voice hoarse with effort. "Stop, you stop." She glanced back over her shoulder, eyes widening when she saw him closing the distance. There was a flicker of disbelief there. Of all the people she could have stolen from, she'd chosen the one who actually chased her. She clutched his wallet tighter and ran faster. A hot thread of anger wound through his chest, but it was tangled with something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the strange sense that this chase was about more than a piece of leather and plastic. As his shoes pounded the pavement, he couldn't help thinking that it would have been easier to call a manager, a driver, security. But that felt wrong. This was between her and him now, 2 strangers tied together by a single reckless moment. She darted down a narrow side street lined with graffiti and overflowing trash cans. The main road noise softened behind them, replaced by the hollow echo of their footsteps and the faint buzz of a neon sign overhead. Keanu followed, breathing hard, feeling the familiar burn in his legs from years of stunt training kicking back to life. For the first time in a long time, this wasn't a scene. No cameras, no fake blood, no director yelling cut. Just real sweat, real speed, real consequences. Halfway down the alley, she made a mistake. Her shoe caught on a broken piece of asphalt and she stumbled, arms pinwheeling for balance. The wallet slipped from her fingers, spinning once in the air and landed in a shallow puddle near a dented metal door. In that instant, time stretched. Keanu saw her reach for it, saw the panic tighten her features, saw the way her shoulders shook like she was running from more than a man behind her. He lunged. She grabbed the wallet at almost the same time he did, their fingers colliding around the wet leather. For a heartbeat they were locked there, both holding on, breathing hard in the dim light of the alley. Up close, she looked younger than he'd expected, maybe early 20s. A faint bruise bloomed near her collarbone, half hidden by the frayed collar of her jacket. Her eyes were not the eyes of a casual thief. They were full of something raw and unsteady, like a storm barely held together. "Let go," Keanu said, voice low but controlled. "It's mine." "No," she shot back, knuckles white around the wallet. "You don't understand, I need it." Keanu's jaw tightened. "You can't just take." A shout echoed from the far end of the alley, cutting through his words. Another man had appeared, thick-bodied, wearing a stained hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He moved with the slow confidence of someone who wasn't afraid of being followed. His eyes flicked from the girl to Keanu to the wallet between them, and a cold smile crept across his lips. "There you are," the man called, voice rough. "Took you long enough, Lily." Keanu felt the girl's grip tremble against his hand. She didn't look at Keanu, she didn't look at the stranger. She just squeezed her eyes shut for a second, as if bracing herself for impact, then whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice." The man's footsteps thudded closer, each one heavier than the last. Keanu stepped instinctively in front of her, still holding the wallet, his old training flaring in his muscles even as his mind scrambled to understand. The anger that had fueled his run faltered, replaced by a prickling sense of danger and an even stronger question. If she wasn't stealing for herself, then who or what was she running from? The stranger stopped a few feet away, eyes narrowing as he recognized exactly who was standing between him and the girl. His smirk disappeared, replaced by something colder, meaner. The alley seemed to shrink around them, the walls closing in, every exit suddenly feeling too far away. Keanu tightened his grip on the wallet, feeling the damp leather under his fingers, and realized this was no longer about being robbed. He was standing in the middle of someone else's war, and he had no idea what the rules were. The man cracked his knuckles, gaze locked on Keanu. "You're gonna hand that over," he said quietly, "and walk away, or this gets complicated." Keanu glanced back at the girl, saw the silent plea in her eyes, the way her lips trembled as if there was so much she wanted to say but couldn't. For the first time since the chase began, his anger completely vanished, replaced by a single, heavy decision pressing on his chest. Should he save his own peace, or stay in this alley and become part of a stranger's desperate secret? And as he opened his mouth to answer, the girl suddenly yanked hard on the wallet between them, her voice breaking with a single word that would change everything. "Please." The word "please" hit him harder than the man's threat. Keanu shifted his body so he was fully between the girl and the stranger, the damp wallet still trapped in both their hands. His breathing was uneven, but his voice came out steady. "She's not giving this to you," he said, "and neither am I." The man's eyes hardened. Up close, his face was rough, early 40s maybe, with the tired cruelty of someone who had stopped feeling sorry for anyone a long time ago. He took another step, boots splashing through the shallow puddle. "You think this is about you, movie star?" he said quietly. "You don't know what she owes." Keanu felt the girl flinch behind him. Her fingers loosened around the wallet for a heartbeat, then tightened again, as if even now she couldn't decide whether to fight or to surrender. He glanced back at her just long enough to catch the terror in her eyes. "What does she owe you?" Keanu asked, not moving. Money, you can have whatever cash is in here, but you're not taking her. The man laughed once, a short, humorless sound. You think it's that simple? She runs, people get hurt, she knows that. His hand dipped into his hoodie pocket. Keanu saw the glint of metal before it fully appeared, a small knife, not huge, but sharp and ugly in the dim alley light. The air seemed to thin around them. Instinct crawled up his spine, every fight scene he'd trained for suddenly feeling like practice for this moment. Keanu raised his free hand, palm open. You don't want to do that, he said. There's always another way. Yeah, the man replied. You walk away, that's the other way. He took a quick step forward and reached for Keanu's shoulder, trying to shove him aside. Years of stunt work resurfaced in Keanu's muscles before his mind had time to argue. He twisted, knocking the man's arm away with his forearm and stepping in close, using the momentum to push him back against the brick wall. The knife clattered to the ground, skidding into a drain. For a second, the man's eyes flashed with shock. Keanu felt the old familiar burn in his arms, the strain in his legs, but he kept his voice calm. You're done, Keanu said. Leave now. The man snarled and drove his knee up, catching Keanu in the thigh. Pain shot through his leg enough to make him lose his grip. The man shoved him back, then swung a fist. Keanu ducked, but not fast enough. The punch grazed his cheek, hot and sharp. Stop, the girl cried, voice cracking. She lunged forward, trying to wedge herself between them, but the man grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward him. She stumbled, hitting the wall with a gasp. His hand clamped around her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. You think he's going to save you? The man hissed in her ear. You think he'll still care when he finds out why I picked him? Keanu pushed through the throbbing in his leg and closed the distance, anger flaring, but not the wild kind that made you reckless. This anger was focused, clear. He stepped in, caught the man's wrist, and pried his grip off the girl with a wrench that made the man curse. The struggle was messy, real, nothing like cleanly choreographed movie combat. Keanu slipped on the wet pavement, his shoulder smacking the wall, but he managed to drive the man backward, using his weight and leverage more than strength. The girl kicked at the man's shin, hard enough that he swore and lost balance. Keanu took the opening. He hooked his foot behind the man's ankle and shoved. The man went down hard, landing on his back with a wheeze as air rushed out of him. For a second, nobody moved. The girl stared, chest heaving, eyes wide. Keanu stepped back, forcing himself not to escalate, not to cross any line he'd regret. His cheek throbbed, his leg ached, but he held the man's gaze. This ends here, Keanu said quietly. You don't touch her again, you don't follow us, you don't come near me, walk away. The man lay there, studying him, bitterness and calculation fighting behind his eyes. Then he slowly pushed himself up to one knee, wincing. His fingers brushed the edge of the drain where the knife had vanished. This isn't over, he muttered. You just made it bigger than you know. He rose, favoring one leg, and backed away down the alley. His glare lingered on the girl for a long second, then slid to Keanu with a dark promise. You have something I need, he said, and I always collect. He turned and limped toward the street, melting into the traffic noise until he disappeared. Silence settled over the alley, broken only by the faint buzz of the neon sign and the echo of their breathing. Keanu realized his hands were still clenched around the wallet. Slowly, he loosened his fingers and looked at the girl. Up close, she looked even more fragile than before, like she might shatter if anyone spoke too loudly. Her eyes were glossy, her lips trembling. A bruise bloomed faintly along her forearm where the man had grabbed her. You okay? He asked, softer now. She nodded, then shook her head, then finally whispered, No, I'm not. Her gaze dropped to the wallet in his hand. Shame washed over her features like a wave. You should call the police, she said. Just get it over with. Keanu studied her, the alley, the direction the man had gone. He could almost feel the weight of all the simple, logical choices pressing down on him. Call the cops, give a statement, walk away, let the system handle it. But under that weight was another feeling, quieter but stronger. The sense that if he turned his back now, he'd be leaving more than a scared girl behind. He took a slow breath. How about, he said, You tell me why you stole from me before we decide what comes next." Her eyes filled instantly. She swallowed hard, fighting it, then nodded once. "Okay," she whispered, "but not here. He has guys everywhere." Keanu glanced back toward the bright mouth of the alley, where people hurried past without noticing any of this. The city moved on, as if their small war had been invisible. "Come on," he said. "We'll find somewhere safe." They stepped out of the alley together, side by side, blending back into the flow of the city. The girl kept her head down, hands shoved deep into her jacket pockets. Keanu held the wallet tight, feeling the edge of the old photograph inside like a heartbeat. As they turned the corner toward a quieter street, she drew in a shaky breath, words pressing at the back of her throat. "I didn't want to take it," she said. "I swear, but if I didn't, my little brother." She cut herself off, voice breaking, and Keanu realized that whatever came next was going to change his day even more than the chase had. They found a small, nearly empty diner 2 blocks away, the kind of place with cracked red booths and a jukebox that probably hadn't worked in years. The waitress gave them a quick, curious glance, then went back to wiping down the counter. A ceiling fan hummed lazily overhead, stirring the smell of coffee and fried eggs. Keanu chose a booth near the window where he could see the street. Habit made him scan for the man from the alley or anyone who seemed out of place. Nothing. Just tired workers, a couple arguing quietly over pancakes, and an older man reading a newspaper like he'd been doing it every morning for 20 years. The girl slid into the opposite seat, keeping her denim jacket wrapped tight around herself like armor. Her hands still shook slightly. She tried to hide it by gripping the edge of the table. "What's your name?" Keanu asked, keeping his voice gentle. She hesitated as if even that small truth felt dangerous. Then she answered. "Lily." He nodded. "I'm Keanu." A faint, disbelieving smile flickered across her face. "Yeah," she said, "I noticed." The waitress brought them water. Keanu ordered coffee. Lily didn't order anything. She stared at the condensation sliding down the side of her glass like it was easier than looking at him. "You said your little brother," Keanu began. "What about him?" Lily's jaw tightened. She placed both hands flat on the table as if bracing herself against a wave. "He's 10, she said. "His name is Noah. He was born with a heart condition. My mom and we've been in and out of hospitals since he could walk. We don't have good insurance. We barely have any at all." Her voice stayed steady at first, but the edges frayed as she continued. "Last month he got worse. They said he needed a procedure or he might not make it through the year. We didn't have the money. My mom already works 2 jobs. I tried everything. Extra shifts, selling stuff, borrowing from friends. It wasn't enough." She stared past him, eyes fixed on something only she could see. "That man in the alley? His name, S. Denny. He's not just some guy on a corner. He lends money to people who don't have any options left. People like us. Everybody knows it's a bad idea, but when it's your kid, your brother, you stop caring about bad ideas." Keanu listened without interrupting, fingers loosely wrapped around his coffee cup. Each word landed heavy, sinking into the quiet space between them. "How much did you borrow?" he asked. 20,000, she said. "The hospital wanted more than that, but it was enough to keep my brother in treatment. I signed whatever he gave me. I didn't read it. I just signed." She looked down at her hands, ashamed. "The interest is insane. We missed 1 payment when my mom got sick, and he doubled it. I started working for him to pay it back. At first, it was just small stuff, running errands, dropping off envelopes. I told myself I wasn't really hurting anyone." Her throat worked around the next sentence. "Then he said he needed someone quick with their hands. Someone who looked harmless, someone people wouldn't suspect." "And that someone was you," Keanu said quietly. She nodded, eyes shining. "I said no. I told him I'm not a thief. He said if I didn't do what he asked, he'd take it out on my family. And I believe him. I've seen what he does when people don't pay." She finally looked at Keanu, the shame and fear laid bare now. "He showed me a picture of you, said you were rich, that you'd never miss what he took. He said all I had to do was bump into you, grab your wallet, and hand it over. After that, my debt would be handled." Lily laughed once, bitter and small. I thought you'd just let it go. You don't even know me, why would you run after me? But then you did, and I panicked and... Her voice broke completely. She pressed her palms to her face, shoulders shaking. The sound of a fork clinking on a plate somewhere behind them suddenly felt very far away. Keanu sat still for a moment, letting the weight of her story settle. He knew there were people like Denny in every city, feeding on desperation. He also knew what loss felt like, how it hollowed you out and made you willing to trade anything for one more day with the person you loved. He reached into his blazer and pulled out the wallet, placing it gently on the table between them. "You didn't open it," he said. She sniffed, lowering her hands. "Didn't get the chance." He flipped it open. The cash was still there, damp at the corners, cards intact. And tucked behind them, slightly wrinkled now, was the small photograph he always kept hidden. A younger version of himself, arm around a woman with dark hair and a soft, tired smile. They were laughing at something outside the frame. Lily's eyes caught on the picture. "Is that someone you lost?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, a long time ago, someone who taught me more about love in a few years than I'd understood my entire life. This is the only copy of that picture I have." "I'm sorry," Lily whispered. "I didn't know." "I know," he said, "and I'm glad I got it back, but I'm more glad we got you away from that alley." She let out a shaky breath, as if she'd been holding it since the moment she'd grabbed his pocket. "So what now?" she asked. "You turned me in, I mean you probably should, I stole from you, that's what I am now, right?" There was no self-pity in her tone, just tired acceptance. Keanu shook his head slowly. "What you did isn't who you are, you're someone who's scared for her brother. That doesn't excuse everything, but it explains a lot. I'm not calling the police on you, Lily." She stared at him like he'd spoken another language. "Why? You don't even know me, you should be angry." "I was," he admitted, "back in the alley, but then I saw that guy's hand on your arm and I heard you say please, and I don't know. Sometimes life gives you a choice, punish someone for what they did or help them so they don't have to do it again." Something in her face softened, like a frozen river starting to crack under the first warmth of spring. She swallowed hard. "You can't help me," she said. "Not really. Denny won't just forget about the money, and he won't forget about you either. He needs something in your wallet, that's why he picked you." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "What could he possibly need from me? My credit cards?" She shook her head. "I heard him on the phone before we went out. He said, once we have his access, the rest is easy. I don't know what that means, but he made it sound big, like bigger than just money." Keanu's mind began to race. Access. He thought of the business card tucked into the side pocket, one with a private code printed on the back, the kind that could open doors, literal and figurative, to a digital vault he was helping manage for a charity fund. Millions of dollars for children's hospitals around the world. If someone like Denny got his hands on that. He felt a cold edge slip under his ribs. "Lily," he said carefully, "did he say anything about where he was going after you brought him my wallet?" She bit her lip thinking. "Just that he had another meeting, said some friends were waiting. He told me if this went well, I'd never have to see him again." Keanu glanced out the window. A dark sedan had just pulled up on the opposite side of the street. The engine idled. The driver didn't get out. Even from here, Keanu could feel the weight of eyes watching the diner. Lily followed his gaze. The blood drained from her face. "That's his car," she whispered. "He found us." The hum of the ceiling fan suddenly sounded like a distant alarm. Keanu's hand tightened around the wallet, every sense sharpening. In that quiet booth, with one frightened girl and a single worn photograph between them, he realized this wasn't only about helping her anymore. If Denny was after that code, then the lives of a lot more children than Noah were about to be pulled into this mess. Keanu took a slow breath, forcing calm into his voice even as his pulse kicked up. "Okay," he said. "We're not running anymore, but we're also not playing this his way." Lily's fingers curled into fists on the table. "What does that mean?" He looked from her to the waiting car outside, feeling the old weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders in a new, sharper shape. It means, he said, we're going to face him together. And as the sedan's door began to open, Lily realized that the man she'd tried to rob might be the only person willing to fight for her when everyone else had already given up.